Welcome to today's AFP webinar live stream, AI Myths Debunked, How to Grow Innovation in Your Fundraising Program, sponsored by BWF. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ryan, and I'll be the operator for the presentation today. We are joined today by our speakers, Reed Tyler and Anna Dirksen. Reed Tyler is the Associate Managing Vice President, Business Intelligence, BWF. With over 15 years of experience in managing various aspects of operations, Reed Tyler found his passion in data, efficiency, and hospitality. He's a results-driven, seasoned leader and manager with professional roles that span multiple industries, though ultimately made philanthropy his industry of choice. The pivotal change in his life occurred when he witnessed a student being told their education would be paid for through a scholarship, without which they could not afford to attend college. He knew right then that supporting nonprofits would become his life's vocation. At BWF, Reed specializes in transforming data into actionable insights. He assists clients in their ability to address complex business challenges and make data-driven decisions by utilizing platforms such as Tableau and Microsoft Power BI. He understands how philanthropy can transform lives. He is driven to further organizations' goals to foster success. Anna Dirksen is passionate about helping fundraising teams succeed, whether that leads to raising more money or being more efficient in supporting their mission. She firmly believes that we all benefit from the incredible generosity of philanthropy, which has and continues to shape the world in which we live. Whether on a local or national scale, NSCs are nonprofit partners doing amazing work with great passion and joy, and that inspires her. Anna brings her decade plus of experience in frontline fundraising and consulting to her role at BWF. As a solutions advisor, she works with prospective clients to refine and solidify their needs and align those needs with BWF's services so that consultants can provide tailored solutions and support. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Reed and Anna to begin today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And I just have to say, Ryan, you have quite the announcer voice. There's nothing so cringe as listening to your own bio being read to you. But if you have to listen to your own bio, Ryan, I would say that you've got a great voice for it. So thank you for that. We're so excited to have you all here today. And would love if you could put in the chat where you're calling in from. We have folks, I believe, from all over the country, if not internationally, joining us. And it's always fun for us to see where we have folks calling in from. As Ryan shared, I'm Anna Dirksen, and I am a solutions advisor at BWF, and I'm joined by Reed Tyler, who's our Associate Managing Vice President of Business Intelligence. And he'll tell us a little bit about what that means, but we're so excited to be here and have this conversation with you today. So what are we going to be talking about? We're going to start with a little about BWF. I promise it won't be too long, but it'll help set the stage for why we're having this conversation today. And then we're going to get into some conversation about AI, right? Artificial intelligence. We're going to start with the baseline, assuming that some of you joining us today are just dipping your toes into the waters of AI and here to learn more. We want to start with kind of that foundational, what is AI? What's included in that? What does that entail? It's a buzzword that we keep hearing, but what does that actually mean? We're going to talk through 6 different AI myths that we're hearing regularly from clients, from other vendors, from kind of just industry articles and whatnot, and help try to debunk some of those myths so you can feel more confident in your ability to approach AI and to leverage it in your organization. And then we're going to wrap up with kind of getting started. How do you put this all to work? And at the end, we'll be taking questions. So please do submit questions. Our folks here are going to help submit them to Reed and I to answer at the end. But we do want to hear your feedback and any questions that you have. So along the way, please do send those in. So before we get into the AI topic, I'm just going to do a brief introduction of BWF. For those who have not heard of us or are encountering us for the first time, BWF is a comprehensive nonprofit consulting firm that has been around for a while. You'll see on my next slide, we've been around since 1983 and have a physical presence here in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, but we've actually become quite a global and kind of diverse workforce in that we're spread out across the country. There's four things that I would say we kind of hang our hat on at BWF. And I can say that because this is my second time around here. So I've just come back to the firm this summer after spending about 5 years at Blackbaud. But I was with BWF about 10 years ago in the higher education practice. So I feel like I can speak to some of these strengths. One is that global and local knowledge. Like I said, we have clients all over the world, and we have consultants all over the country. But yet we know specific markets as well, and we know the challenges that billion-dollar campaigns are going through. But we also understand the challenges and the opportunities for local nonprofits who maybe have one or two fundraising staff, or maybe no fundraising staff, and the executive director is picking up that role. And so we work with clients of all scales and sizes, and we have kind of that global and local perspective there. I would say that we're very rigorous in our data, and I'm going to tell a data story in a minute about why we're data rigorous and how we've gotten here. But that's one thing that we really take pride in, is the center of some of our work, of all of our work, really. Along with that goes with our history of innovation, right? So we never want to be doing things just because that's the way it's always been done, but thinking about how do we do things to raise more money, to be more efficient, to perhaps work smarter, not harder, and harder. And so thinking of how can we shape and change this industry in an innovative way. And then finally, deep specialization. And this is something that's really kind of a new model for BWF in the last, I would say, 5 years or so, is that we have teams of specialists within specific areas in fundraising and advancement. So I'll give an example of, Reed would be an example of that, right? He is very focused in on data intelligence, systems and reporting, dashboards, using business intelligence to advance your goals, right? We also have folks who specialize in prospect research. We just hired a new fantastic consultant for donor relations. And so we have deep specializations that allow us to go deep with our clients across the board. Like I said, we were established in 1983, so we've been doing this for about 40 years. And we serve about 275 clients annually with our 100 team members. So thrilled that you all are able to join us today, and hopefully, seeing some of those locations come in, it looks like we have a wider reach here today too, and excited for that. So a little bit about BWF's history around AI, data science, how we're thinking about analytics and data in fundraising. And I'm not going to walk through each of these little milestones, but really the point here is to illustrate that we've been doing this for a long time, and we've been thinking about this for a long time. You can see that we developed Prospect Select in 1995, which was one of the first wealth screening tools to exist in fundraising. Right now, wealth screening is very common, and nearly all of you are probably leveraging wealth screening or a tool like wealth screening in your advancement operations. And then bringing on Josh Burkholtz. So Josh Burkholtz is our CEO, data scientist by nature. And he really started the first analytics consulting practice in fundraising. So he's been doing this for a long time. He created some of the first predictive models for fundraising. And, as you can see here, wrote the book on it. And that's kind of led us to where we are today, which is in a position to really leverage the tools and technologies of today in a way that's meaningful for nonprofits and for other partners that we work with. We're really proud of this history of innovation. And part of that is thinking about AI and how are we using AI in fundraising as an industry and as a practice. So with that, we're going to go into kind of what is AI. And Reed, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Anna. So let's first start with a kind of a common definition to kind of set the scene and the stage of what we're talking about. So artificial intelligence, as I think about it, refers to the development of computer systems and technologies that perform tasks that we would typically expect human intelligence, right? So that can include problem solving, that's understanding language, recognizing patterns, learning from data, and problem solving to make decisions. So that using those algorithms and models allow computers and technologies to simulate intelligent behavior. And I think that's what's key here, is we are using technology to simulate that intelligence, right? So here we have a couple of examples. I wanted to break this down because I think AI recently has been more of a umbrella term, and most recently focused on just generative AI, which is just one component of what AI really does. So first and foremost, I want to talk about machine learning. This is the idea that algorithms can shift and adjust and fine-tune without human intervention. And that's the key point. So I heard a while back one of the best analogies to describe this is if you gave a computer a bow and an arrow and say, put the arrow in the target, it will do that over and over and over until it can figure it out and hit the target every time. But if you think about the components that the computer has to consider in its simulations, has to figure out what gravity is, for one. What are the other physics involved that would actually get the arrow across into that target? But that kind of adjustment and fine tuning to the algorithm to make sure it's accurate 100% of the time, that's the machine learning component. Second is natural language processing. So this is more common in what we're seeing with ChatGPT and all of this. It's the ability of a model, of a artificial intelligence to interpret natural language and produce an output from that. So from a software development standpoint, I can say, write a software that does X, Y, and Z. It interprets that, and then the output is the software language, the coding, etc. Somewhat similarly is computer vision. So this, instead of language, we're giving it images and video and digital assets that it can interpret and then provide feedback, insight, what have you. When we think about robotics in terms of AI, we're just combining the technologies that I just talked about and allowing a physical presence of AI to do physical tasks in the physical world. So machine learning, so it can get better at what it's doing. Natural language processing, so it can understand instructions, interact with natural language with others. Computer vision, so it can see and interact with physical objects. And then the last is expert systems. So these are systems that are deeply intelligent in a very niche or specific field. You can think about the medical industry and diagnosing, diseases, that sort of thing, working alongside physicians. In fundraising, I think about expert systems as this can be your campaign simulation tool, right? We can adjust levers and see that simulation and resource allocation and see the outcome of what it might do for our campaign. So now that we've talked about what AI is, I think it's equally important to talk about what is not AI. And I think this is important because as you're adopting tools in your role, it's important to know what is AI and what is not AI so that you know what you're purchasing, you know what the vendor is supplying. So number one is most chatbots. Most of the chatbots that you see out there that you're engaging with, call it on a website, those are not natural language processing chatbots with conversational AI. That's instead a human intervened rule-based system most of the time that is going down decision trees. And the key here is it is predefined. And so when you ask it a question, it has a couple different options that it can go to, including I don't understand the question, right? Rule-based automation, this is the idea of, again, a human-intervened system that is predefined that does tasks for us. So if you think about in fundraising, somebody gives a gift, maybe they automatically receive an email with that acknowledgement and receipt. That's a rule-based automation that we are intervening. Just because it happens on its own and it's autonomous, it doesn't mean it's AI. Common workflows, very similar to rule-based automation, but I think about all of the background processes that are happening, for example, in that do things based on the data it receives. So as it receives new data, maybe something will happen. Somebody gives a gift over $1,000 and that moves them into a different giving society. Maybe the record would update with that new giving society. Those are all common workflows that we're talking about. Again, not artificial intelligence. Static predictive models. So this happens in a snapshot of time. This is not a model learning to be better, to fine tuning, to be more accurate in who, say, a major giving prospect might be. Still helpful, but not AI. And then finally, rule-based scoring. So this is your typical kind of case engagement score to where we're predefining maybe points that people can get as they engage with your organization, call it social media, volunteering, being on the board, etc. Those might get people points. They might highlight engagement, but again, not AI. I'll turn it back to Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. I think that's so helpful. I, for one, and I work at BWF. I used to work at Blackbaud, and I'm still learning the ins and outs of AI. And I think part of it is that we're continuously changing and evolving and growing. So things that exist today did not exist a year ago, did not exist 5 years ago. And what exists today will be different than what exists a year from now, right? So part of it is just trying to figure out what the kind of the boundaries that we're working within. It can be helpful here. So thanks, Reed, for that. So as we think about kind of AI applications in fundraising, like I said, there's constantly evolving in terms of what we're using AI for in our fundraising practice. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, some examples of what we're hearing from clients, what we're seeing out there in the industry, what we're providing as a vendor. So generative content, right? So this is, like Reed said, maybe that example of using the most common example would be like a chat GPT or a generative AI tool to maybe start a draft of a stewardship letter, or maybe to create content for your next direct mail appeal, right? Giving it some prompts and some data points or maybe some themes, and then asking AI to kind of create that first draft for you. Prospect identification, right? So how do we use these either predictive models, which can be a form of AI, some machine learning, etc., to really narrow in on who are the best prospects for perhaps a portfolio, for management, for discovery or qualification work, etc. I know, as a former gift officer myself, when you're handed a list of perhaps thousands of potential major gift prospects, you're like, where do I start? How do I even begin to start working this list? And that's where some of these tools and models can be helpful to say, okay, I'm going to work from top to bottom, and those with the highest likelihood of making that planned gift or major gift, that's where I'm going to start. And so it can help kind of sort and make working through that list a little bit more efficient, so that we're making sure we're using our resources of time well to see the right donors. Action recommendation. This is one that I'm super excited about in starting to see more applications with various clients. So this is when we're looking at behaviors of potential donors or current donors, using AI to recommend next steps based on their past behaviors or past behaviors of what we're seeing as similar types of donors. So if we see a certain behavior or a pattern of behaviors, then recommending that action. So maybe, okay, they've been giving an annual gift for years, they've suddenly increased that amount, and they've engaged with us in a different way, maybe through events. Maybe that action recommendation from AI would be to qualify them for a major gift or something like that. And that can be really fun too. Business simulation. This is something that Reed's really good at. And so I am embarrassed to even speak about it in front of him, but thinking about how can we use models and forecasting to predict various scenarios and simulate various scenarios with various levers, right? So essentially thinking about, if you wanted to predict the amount that you could raise next year with the current pipeline and your current resourcing and staff and portfolios, et cetera, what would that number be? Okay, and then what would that number be if we could add 3 FTE? Or what would that number be if we could send 2 extra mail appeals? And starting to play with some of those simulations to see how different resources and inputs can affect those outputs. So that's really fun. Donor journey mapping. This is another example I think that a lot of you have probably heard of, but maybe haven't put into practice, is thinking about that complete donor journey. Again, remaining donor centric and thinking about how they want to have an impact with the organization, but creating some systems on the back end to help support us as the fundraising staff, right? We know that we all wear a lot of hats, so anytime we can streamline, that can be helpful. And then the last one being constituent perception, right? So this is, again, thinking about something where we might be pairing somebody's behaviors, like how often they're giving, how much they're giving, to what specific appeals or projects are they giving? And we match that with something like how they feel, right? So how do they feel about the organization? How engaged are they? And putting those two together to create kind of a constituent perception, or sometimes we can even do personas and that sort of a thing. So this is some of the kind of, like I said, the tip of the iceberg of ways that we're seeing AI in fundraising. But I think the most important part here is to not get lost in the definitions or in the applications, right? There's a lot out there. It's certainly a hot topic of today. But what I want you to think about and really focus in on and read too, we'll speak about this, is thinking about your goal. What are you trying to achieve? Start there and then work backwards into perhaps how AI might help you get there. Right. So the whole idea behind AI and using AI in fundraising is to get more value from your data to meet your business needs. That's all, right? So how do we raise more money more efficiently to help support our wonderful organizations? So try not to get too bogged down in specific definitions or specific applications, right? And think about first what the goal is, and then we can work backwards from there to see what the right fit might be or how you might be able to leverage AI to accomplish that goal. So with that, we're going to hop into some myths about AI, right? So when I ask folks what's standing in the way of using AI, or what are the barriers to entry, there's a lot of unknown. And I think there's a lot of maybe just caution around like not being sure how to use it, if it's safe. Is it effective? Can I trust it? Right. And so until you start working with a little bit more and build up that trust, I think it's a really natural question to have. And it's one that I certainly have as well, and have had in the past when thinking about AI. So we've kind of broken down some of these myths around AI into 3 different categories. One, we're hearing that people are kind of curious about the impact on human roles and or how personalized it is, right? So AI sounds so robotic and so techy. How can we really use it in fundraising, which is such a personal art, really? The second being accessibility and cost, right? I know a lot of us come from smaller nonprofits where we're maybe on reduced budgets. We have constrained resources. So you're thinking, oh, that's a cool tool, but it's not something that my organization can afford. We're going to talk about that. And then finally, that question around kind of risks and reliability. Is it safe? Can I trust it? And maybe some of those fears that folks have about using AI for these reasons. So Reed, we're going to start with the human impact, because I think this is really important as we think about AI and how organizations are implementing AI. So one of the myths that I've heard is that AI is going to take over jobs like prospect research or annual giving. And obviously that feels scary to those of us who are perhaps in those roles. So what do you think about this myth? Obviously, we're gonna call it a myth. Is AI taking over jobs? And can you address this myth for us?
Yeah, you bet. This is definitely one of the most common things that we hear. This is a concern. We hear it at the executive level. Am I going to be managing a team of robots in the future? How is this actually going to look? So the first thing I want to say is that when we first kind of dipped our toe into the generative AI space, I think that's where this idea kind of hit the mainstream media. And there was a report that I read from a consulting firm that said 70% of all jobs are going to be impacted. And I think the takeaway that most people assumed was impact means replacement. And I think that's wrong. And as that company came back and said, what we're seeing is highly productive people, ultra efficient employees. And so that's number one. 60% of the job titles today didn't exist 50 years ago. So as AI becomes more adopted into our day-to-day workflows, I think we're going to see new jobs emerge. 5 years ago, you've probably, or maybe you haven't heard this yet, but 5 years ago, definitely you'd never heard of a prompt engineer. Somebody that their whole profession is to design prompts for tools like ChatGPT to optimize the output that they receive. so highly specialized that they can achieve that 99.9% accuracy, right? And then historically, 9 to 10% of jobs created every decade are new. So we're going to see new job titles and new career advancement abilities. On the other hand, we're also going to see job evolution. As AI is going to help us with mundane tasks, we're going to be able to use that time to think about more complex things. Instead of doing manual data entry as an administrator, maybe we're going to be managing the tools that are, doing the manual entry. And that kind of turns into the role augmentation, to where AI, just like your expert personal assistant, that's going to help you with all these human capabilities. So rather than replacing job, AI provides all of these tools that is going to help employees perform their jobs more efficiently and with greater insight, and ultimately increasing their productivity and effectiveness. So it's the complementing the human work that I think we need to focus on so we can realize that net efficiency. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think anytime folks hear that this might be replacing a job, right, it's a natural place where we feel perhaps insecure about our work, or nervous about what the future of our industry would look like. And so I think it's natural that we start thinking about not replacing, obviously, prospect research and annual giving, but how great would it be if a prospect researcher could spend their time strategically thinking about the strategy for a specific donor and how we're going to get to them, versus pulling a list for, who might be out in the San Diego area or something like that, right? And so using them and their time more strategically in the things that only a human can do, and freeing up that time, I think, to your point, by using AI to kind of create or check some of the things off the list, if you will. One thing I know that you said was that people can use AI as this assistant. As somebody whose kids went back to school this week and our life is a little nuts right now, I could totally use another assistant. Like, what are some ways that you're seeing folks, fundraisers or advancement teams, using AI kind of in that assistant type role? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, I think the biggest example here is, well, first, to segment what AI cannot do very well, and that's emotional intelligence, right? Relationship building with another human. I don't think AI is ever going to be good at that. Being creative, just in general, and that includes strategic planning. There is that generative, and I don't mean generative AI, there is that generative component to strategic planning that requires that abstract thought that humans can do, but AI cannot. So that being said, I like to see when people are using AI as a different perspective, a unique perspective. Maybe you don't have experience in some area. I think a great example is, I've never asked for a major gift. I don't know what that's like. I don't know the feeling. I don't know the strategy. Well, I kind of know the strategy. But if I don't have that perspective, how can I develop tools, AI tools, whatever they are, for frontline fundraisers if I don't have their perspective? Well, that's one thing that AI is really good at. If I can define who they are and what lens and what experience they should give me information from, I can ask it all kinds of questions. I can get all kinds of information about how maybe I should think differently about the tools that I'm giving, and how it's going to help frontline fundraisers be more efficient, right? I think there's always that perspective gap. So another quick example that I like to do in my personal life is, I also have a GPT for Michelin star cooking, because I like to create fine dining at my house. And my GPT gives me advice. It tells me when I'm doing something blatantly wrong, when I have terrible ideas, but also when I have good ideas. So that's perspective. Of course, I'm not a Michelin star chef, but it's nice to have that perspective at home.
I love that. I'm coming to dinner sometime. Next
You're
time
invited.
you're cooking with your GPT chef. Like, I would never even have thought of that, Reed. So interesting in the different ways that people are using this. So next, thinking about kind of myth number 2, this is another one that I've been hearing, especially from my my friends who are frontline fundraisers, or maybe managing frontline fundraisers and teams of frontline fundraisers. AI doesn't know our donors, right? So I think one thing that all of us who've, asked for those gifts, as you mentioned earlier, feel is that it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of those conversations with donors. And there's no way that a computer could know what I know based on our conversations, right? And so I think this is one thing that people feel a little hesitant about. How could the algorithm know my donor like I do? So what do you think about that myth? And can you kind of unpack it for us a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. I think the number one thing we should understand is that there is so much data that exists around the relationships and the feeling and stuff that we don't collect. So that's one thing. But AI doesn't know our donors. It sure does have a lot of data on them, though. It sure does create predictions at scale, which is something that we can't do as humans. If I have a portfolio of 100 people, say, maybe I can spend a lot of time really studying all the data that I have and trying to look for patterns and one-off, maybe I'll find something. But imagine that doing that at scale with a million donors. And then think about the nuanced patterns that maybe we're never going to see. I heard this idea of there's this donor that we don't have great net worth information on. They've given $10 for the last 5 years. They suddenly changed and they gave $50 to a capital project. Well, an AI might pick that up and say, this is unique. But we would never look at that because they don't have the common indicators that we're constantly looking for. Maybe our static predictive models might bubble that up, but that's something that at scale, AI is very good at.
I love that. And I love the example that, you might be able to do it on a one-on-one, right? You're thinking about a principal gift strategy and you have nothing but time to focus on this one couple that you're engaging with. But if you're maybe a mid-level leadership, giving officer, or like I said, you're maybe the only fundraiser in your organization and you're wearing all of the different hats, you don't have time to comb through everybody's individual data and giving history and Google everybody to see if there's something that's happened to them or their wealth recently, right? And so being able to scale some of that is really important. And I think, yes, it's not going to know your donor the way you do emotionally having coffee with him. But if we're thinking about how we address large data sets and think about how we can strategically leverage that information, AI can be that path forward.
Yeah. Another example I've heard is for international programs. AI can help provide insights and perspective into different regions, different cultures, so we can fine-tune our engagement strategies to a culture that we're not familiar with. That way we're able to engage at scale with diverse communities.
Oh, I love that. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Myth number 3. AI costs money and it's not in the budget, right? So I think a lot of us are working with constrained resources and trying to best utilize every dollar that we have. Is AI affordable? Can it be affordable? Can, smaller organizations or organizations who don't have a ton in the budget leverage tools like this?
This is an easy one for me because a lot of it right now is free. There are a lot of free tools out there and even freemium tools, which if you don't know what that means like an intro to our product. So you can have X amount of images created, that sort of thing. There are so many tools out there right now that the net efficiency gain just by taking advantage of the free tools is huge. And net efficiency gain turns into net financial gain, which allows companies and organizations to invest in further AI tools. So I think about a couple. ChatGPT obviously comes to mind. Any of the other language models. There's a lot of organizations like BWF that are providing great AI insights into prospect ID and others. Canva is a great one for design. Otter.ai does voice to text. Is great for Zoom or listening, that sort of thing. And I use the Zoom AI summary all the time. That helps with my meeting minutes, with follow-up, all of that stuff. And a lot of that stuff is free.
I love it. I love it. And the technology has changed a lot, right? So thinking about, if you had maybe purchased predictive models in the past, those were probably built by a data scientist by hand, tested by that data scientist, etc. Now the way that we're able, BWF and other organizations as well are able to build models, it's at scale, it's using things like IBM Watson where you can create it in a much more efficient way. So I think there too, the process behind it has come so far in the last 20 years that it's the price has been able to come down, which is always great.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. In the past, as you mentioned, it took a lot of time to refine models to be more and more accurate. But with the advent of machine learning and making those tools more and more accessible to data scientists, you can provide not just better models, but more models to think about not just who to talk to, but how to talk to or when to talk to, right?
So cool. Myth number 4. My organization isn't big enough or sophisticated enough for AI. This is one that I think, is out there in the community where folks are thinking like, listen, I'm managing a program, I'm wearing 18 hats, like we don't have room for this type of work or this type of data. Like we just need to get our work done and do our thing. Is there kind of a line in which you have to be big enough or sophisticated enough to use AI and to leverage it?
So if you want to build your own language models and your own neural networks within your organization, sure, you need highly technical people. But we actually see AI kind of benefiting the small organizations the most, because as Anna mentioned, if you're wearing 18 hats and doing everything at half speed, call it, maybe with the net efficiency gains you're getting from AI tools and all the free tools that are out there, well, maybe that means you can do all 18 hats at full speed. And that's what we're seeing. So I almost think it's flipped to where, maybe organizations from a net efficiency gain perspective are benefiting more than the larger organizations.
I love it. And I think too, the comment you made earlier applies here as well, where those different perspectives, right? So thinking about, I might be doing everything from major gifts to managing a campaign to running our direct mail appeals to doing some prospect research, whatever I need to do, because I'm a one-woman shop here, like just sometimes getting that draft started of that next direct mail appeal where you can even just go and refine it and tweak it a little bit. But sometimes even just getting a draft started, which would save you an hour or two of time, can be a helpful tool. So thinking about some of those things that can maybe, again, check a few things off your list.
Yep, totally agree. I have a colleague that just had to deal with a difficult donor situation to where they had to change the designation of the donor's gift because it no longer strategically made sense for the organization. Those emails are tough. And so if it takes, maybe 2 hours and then, sleep on it and then come back to it the next day for another hour to draft those emails, it's so much more efficient to use a tool like, any of these large language models to help craft that email in 10 minutes and have it be maybe more effective.
Yep. But that's a great segue into our next myth, which is you can't trust AI, right? So even if you have AI helping you craft that email for a difficult conversation or a difficult message, you do need to review it, right? It's not just like copy and paste and send. You do need to review it. Let's talk about, can we trust AI results? How effective and accurate are they? And this is something that I know is out there as, a reason why folks aren't really leveraging AI.
Yeah. And so what they're talking about is the concept of hallucination, where generative AI, what it's doing is it's providing wildly incorrect content, right? I mean, there's lots of examples online that are, relatively funny and such, but it all comes back to how you're strategically using the tools. And number one that Anna mentioned, you can trust, but you have to verify. And so I think about this in two different spectrums. So on one side of the spectrum, you have generic questions, you have generic content that you're seeking, like what are best practices in fundraising? I bet you're going to get some pretty accurate, sourced information because there's a lot of it on the internet and the way that the model is trained. There's a lot of it there. On the other end of the spectrum, when we're dealing with highly nuanced, information or sending. That's where it can be tricky, and that's where you need an expert to verify. I think about my neighbor, the software programmer, who's using AI to help him, but he knows enough to where if it provides suboptimal code, for example, he can identify that quickly. I think it's the in-between where you have maybe a novice person diving into the complex areas that it can be tricky. And this is all based on your data governance. What policies are in place? How is your organization dealing with the use of AI? Because I think the important thing is it's here, it's free, it's accessible, and people are using it. So whether or not you want to harness that in and ensure that they're using it for the greater good for your organization and strategically appropriate, that's up to you.
Yeah, and I think it probably goes along with, the phrase that probably everyone's heard from their database administrator at some point: garbage in equals garbage out, right? So if you are, maybe if in the case of generative AI, if your prompt is not clear, or if it's not, encompassing what you actually need or want, you're not giving it enough information to really produce something that you could trust or that would be helpful to you, right? Same with, using data in other ways. If your data set, if your database is messy and things aren't in the right place and it's all sorts of a mess, then yeah, maybe the data coming out isn't going to be as helpful, right? So part of it is it's on yourself, as it's always been as an organization, to make sure that your data is in a clean place, so that those inputs are good and in a good place. I think, when I think about some of these things and trust but verify, I think that's where people often get kind of hung up on that verify place. They try it, they trust it, it doesn't work for them, or it maybe provides a result that wasn't exactly what they're looking for, and then they just move on. And I think it is important that you iterate and you try. The people I know who have most successfully used AI, it wasn't like they sat down in one afternoon and started using AI overnight. It was that they tried different things. They tried asking different questions. They maybe provided more context as to what they were looking for, or maybe they thought about their question differently. And that can help get better results too. The more you know what you want on the way in or on the front end, the better the results are going to be. I think where it struggles sometimes is if you ask this open-ended question and expect the precise result. That's not going to happen, right? Myth number 6, our last myth for right now or for today: AI adds unnecessary security risk. Okay, so this is a bit of a doozy, and we saved it for last because it is important to think about security, and how to keep, certainly our donors' information, our constituents, our volunteers' information really safe. So this is one that I think is obviously a valid concern, but Reed, I'd love your take on, AI and risk.
Yeah, similar to trust, I think first and foremost, the level of risk tolerance should be governed and mitigated by your organization. You get to choose what risk tolerance is acceptable at your organization. And so that means we need to have very strict data handling processes like data governance. I like to talk about data governance. Not a lot of people do, but it's so important, especially with the advent of AI. What are we sharing to AI? Are we giving all the data? Are there strategies to, maybe the idea of data minimization, to where we're providing the least of necessary data to get to what we want? Thinking about providing context and not data, or asking general questions, how do I create a predictive model? Or how do I best use this? Or I have this data that generally represents X, Y, and Z. What are my questions then? So that's one strategy. If you are using AI tools, I think, there's certain questions that you can ask vendors to really understand what the risk privacy is going to be. One of them is data retention. Always ask what the retention policy is.
We may have lost Reed. Are you there?
Oh, I'm here. That's
Okay,
weird.
we
Am I
lost
back?
you for a second.
All right. So data retention, understanding, are they keeping your data Is it forever? Are they using it to train your models? All vendors should be able to answer that question. Also, you can develop AI tools and vendors to provide the tool within your network, your ecosystem, so the data is not leaving your environment, but you can still take advantage of these really sophisticated tools. And then if you are having to share to vendors, if they're providing AI tools or whatnot, just ensure that the data is encrypted in transit and at rest, making sure you're using secure API connections, anonymizing it if you have to beforehand. So these are all different strategies that you can mitigate risk. Risk always exists. It's all about the strategy around how to mitigate the risk ahead of time.
Awesome. And I know Reed had sent me his notes before we started, and this is something he could talk about for 8 hours. I wish we had time for that. But we do have some questions coming in that I really want to make sure we get to. So we're going to keep moving and maybe address risk and security a little bit more in our questions. So kind of where do we go from here, right? We've been talking about AI now for 45 minutes. Maybe you're a little bit more interested than you were at the beginning of the hour. I would say start with your questions first, right? What are the business problems that you're trying, and not even problems, what are the business goals that you're trying to solve for? What are the things keeping you up at night? Are you trying to address a decline in your donor count? Are you trying to bolster your pipeline? Are you trying to be more strategic in your messaging and your communications with your donors and your volunteers? Think about the outcomes that you're looking for to drive how and when you should invest in AI. And then think about bringing it from kind of that front back. The second point here is to bring your team along. So change management can be a huge part of any change, but technology changes in particular, right? And I think this call is probably an example of there's a wide range of comfort and an interest in using some of these new tools. Some of us are probably tried it the first day it came out, or have been reading about it, or have been interested in it for a long time, and are more kind of tech forward. Others of us might be a little bit more cautious or just uncertain, or maybe not know where to start, right? And so thinking about everybody on that spectrum who's on your team and how can we manage that change as we roll out some of these initiatives. Engage. So I would say participate in the conversation. A lot of what we've shared today is from our conversations with donors. We get the perk of working with, 200 plus donors or organizations a year at BWF. So we get a lot of different perspectives on how folks are using different tools, different types of AI, etc. So I would encourage you to engage in those conversations, whether it be through AFP, through, I'm hoping the chat here in this webinar, because I think we all can learn from one another and how we can best leverage some of these tools. And then finally, be thoughtful about the approach. So kind of one of the little quotes here we have is innovation is not as impactful as thoughtful innovation, right? So we're not just putting in place any kind of automation or AI tool out there just for bells and whistles and the heck of it, right? But really going back to what are we trying to achieve? What is the outcome that we are hoping for, right? And then what is our vision for the future and how can these tools help us get there? And then thinking about, again, what are the different pieces that you can put in place? Before we get to, let me see here, questions, let me take a quick look in the chat. It looks like there's quite a few questions coming in. I'll start with the first one, and Reed, I'm going to lean on you for some of these because you're the expert here. But the question is, all we hear repeatedly about, or all we repeatedly hear about, is ChatGPT. Is this still the leading tool? If so, how do fundraisers make the most of it? Is it advisable to pay for a subscription to ChatGPT, and is it safe, quote unquote, safe from a confidentiality standpoint?
That's a lot of questions. So I'll start by saying the reason why I use ChatGPT in examples that I gave today was because I think it's the most widely known. It's what is in the media the most. You hear about that tool. You hear about the company OpenAI quite a bit. There are lots of language models out there. Google has some. Facebook has some. There's a company called Anthropic that has Claude. So there are lots of language models out there. But there are also lots of tools out there. So that's one. So ChatGPT is, I don't know if I'd call it leading. I'd say competing and in the top for sure, but there's a lot of great tools out there. How do fundraisers make the most of it? I think, as Anna highlighted, engage with it. Start to engage with it. You'll find ways that it can make you more efficient for sure. Is it advisable to pay for a subscription? I don't know. I think that if you're consistently reaching the limits, and you'll know when you hit the limits and you can't engage with it, maybe, but I hear a lot of people that don't. And then, is it safe from a confidentiality standpoint? I don't know that answer. OpenAI certainly claims, and all these other companies certainly claim that there is confidentiality in place, but they also still say that they use the conversational data to further train models. So I think it goes back to that governance standpoint. Lean on your IT folks or data folks that are crafting these policies, and just make sure that you understand them deeply.
Mm-hmm. And I would add, just making sure that there's never any identifiable information in there, right? So if you are using ChatGPT or another one of these tools, right? I'm not going to write in there, something about Reed Tyler and his address and everything else. Like, create this letter for Reed Tyler at so and so street. Like, that's obviously not what we want to be doing. So keeping out, maybe using pseudonyms or using acronyms or something like that. Keeping out any kind of organizational name, any individual names, any kind of PII, obviously, is another way to add a layer of protection here. So here's a question around kind of what specific tools do you recommend for generating content, which we kind of covered with ChatGPT. Identifying prospects is a big one. Recommending actions, simulating business and donor journeys. So some of the kind of those application questions from the slide that said all of the different ways fundraising is using AI. Do you have specific tools that you enjoy or recommend, or is this something maybe folks could reach out to your email address to have a conversation about it?
Yeah, I think, the ones that I had mentioned are kind of those freemium, but if anybody is interested in having, subsequent conversation about what, the full maybe menu of options across the philanthropic space are right now, I'm happy to have that conversation. There's a lot of great companies doing a lot of great things.
I love it. Let's see here. Can you speak to the various donor databases and their use of AI? How best to choose? Ooh, great question. And I don't know that it's a question for Reed so as much as maybe somebody else on our team, but Reed, do you have any thoughts on that?
I can say that the big CRMs are desperately trying to get some sort of AI in their platform. Salesforce has historically had Einstein, which does some predictive capabilities and such. There's others that I've heard are doing like first draft emails. So yeah, I agree, Anna. We have other experts that will help with system selection that know all those nuances and details, and I would recommend pointing to them.
Great. Let's see here. Another question around predictive modeling, and if you know of any. I don't know of any free predictive modeling products out there. But Reed, do you want to kind of address affordability around predictive modeling products?
Yep. When it comes to philanthropy, I also am unaware of any purely free products. But again, there's a lot of companies that are doing a lot of great things, including BWF. So again, I'd say that's one of those scenarios where please reach out to either Anna or myself, and we can definitely chat through options.
Okay, I'm going to ask maybe two more questions, and then we have a couple of slides to get through. So how to best craft a prompt for the most accurate results? Any resources you can refer us to?
Not specifically, but there is lots of information out there. And it's more granular than you'd think. So I would say start with the content that you expect the outcome to generate. So describe that. And then your perspective, what you want the perspective of the GPT to be. Furthermore, tell it what not to produce. I think that's really important. but there's more and more rules that you can apply. I would suggest Googling it. There's lots of great examples out there that can produce those. Furthermore, I would template that. So I've got a couple different templates, like I had mentioned for the Michelin star GPT. That's always prompted with a certain template so that I can get those results. That helps be more efficient. I hope that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Reed, that I've seen can be helpful is just iterating, right? So you give a prompt, it'll give you a response. Maybe it's a stewardship letter or a invitation for qualify and visit. Of course, we wouldn't tell them we're qualifying them, but and then it doesn't give you back exactly what you're looking for. You can have it rewrite with a focus on gratitude, or you can have it rewrite and include that, we'll be providing an update about XYZ initiative. So you just get started, I would say, and then from there you can always hone and iterate, and that will help you determine too what that template should look like in the future when you're trying to create these. So last question, and then we're going to move on to some wrap-up slides. Does BWF have any policies or training resources on using AI securely and ethically?
We do. We help organizations with that data governance piece, and I think that's really important for people to, if they're not paying attention to it, or maybe it was on the back burner for a long time, that's something you really. I'm frozen again. Be frozen.
We'll give him a minute here. But I think where he was going with that was that, yes, that is something BWF can do, and it's really important, right? I would say it's kind of the estate planning of data, right? Like everybody knows that they should do it, but they often wait too long. And so really thinking about how your organization has policies in place to make sure you're protecting your information and using AI ethically.
Yep, that's right. Nicely done, Anna.
That was my little tap dance. Okay, we're just coming up on the end of the hour, and I'm probably standing between you and your lunch. We appreciate your feedback. We want to make sure that the content we are providing is helpful. It's a resource to you all that you're learning. So please take the survey. You can use your phone to scan this QR code. Another thing that didn't exist 10 years ago, and provide us that feedback. And also ideas. If you have ideas of other things you'd like us to talk about, or like I said, we work with hundreds of clients around the world a year. So sometimes we don't know better, we just know different, right? And we can bring different perspectives. So if there's something in particular that's keeping you up at night and you think a webinar would be a good idea, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback there. And then let's see here what's next. Up next, so we have a webinar, again, another QR code, around your blueprint to increase donor retention and pipeline growth. And I'm so excited about this. Angela Altimore joined the BWF family this spring, and she is really well respected in the donor relations space. She is very smart and has some ideas around how to increase retention to grow that pipeline, which I know, Reed, is a kind of a challenge for nearly every organization that I'm talking to, and every VP and Chief Development Officer I've been talking to has, concerns around pipeline. So tune in on September 26th. It'll be at 1 o'clock Central to listen to Angela. And then finally, just a thank you. Thank you again for giving us an hour of your day. We know it's a busy time of year. Thank you for engaging in this conversation around AI and for participating with the AFP dialogue, right? We all do better when we all do better. So I think whenever we can come together like this and have conversations about things that are really moving our industry, we're all the better for it. I'm Anna Dirksen. We're going to be signing off here, but please do reach out if you have any questions about AI, about Reed's Michelin Chat GPT, about resources that we can provide. We'd love to continue the conversation. Reed's information is here too. Find us on LinkedIn. And maybe we'll see you at the next AFP International Conference. It's next spring. It's still a ways out, but hopefully we'll be seeing you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
On behalf of AFP Global, I would like to thank you for your participation in today's webinar live stream. Please take a brief moment to complete our survey, which helps us program future events. Please join us for our next webinar, Unlock More Good, Innovative Ways to Amplify Engagement on Giving Tuesday, sponsored by Gravity on September 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This concludes today's stream. Thank you and have a great day.